You're all familiar with the Looney Tunes. If I have to explain them, you are living in the biggest vacuum of pop culture, and I applaud that. The Looney Tunes have had cycles of pop culture relevance since their inception, and most people's biggest association today is probably Space Jam. The tunes have inspired many creators, including the creators of Spielberg cartoons, Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, and Freakazoid. In the early 2000s, Warner Brothers was really struggling to find a way to keep them relevant. Their first attempt to keep them relevant being Baby Looney Tunes, and the second being Duck Dodgers. The third and final show was a series so controversial that it caused Looney Tunes content to be paused for 5 years. But let's skip ahead to 2020. I know, dark times. In 2020, Animaniacs got a continuation on Hulu, which I watched to deal with Supernatural being over. I was enjoying myself until this happened.
Robots, monsters, Tiny Toons, Sylvester, talking cars, ducks, dogs, bunnies, Elmer Fudd, whatever these guys are.
At this moment, my need to rewatch a cartoon from my childhood overtook me. And that's what I did. Loonatics Unleashed ran on the Kids WB from 2005 till 2007, following the Looney Tunes descendants after they gained superpowers and became superheroes. This show is often considered one of the worst things with the Looney Tunes name on it, which I will then point to Baby Looney Tunes. At least things happened in this show. It's disregarded by the whole Warner Company and considered a reminder of what not to do. Exact quotes from an executive. It didn't have reruns on Cartoon Network or Boomerang, and although there are DVD copies of both seasons, it wasn't exactly something they advertised. The only time you're going to get it acknowledged is if you bring it up to the voice actors at cons, and given the lack of visuals in front of me, doesn't happen very often. The only time the show is referenced is to remind people of how bad it is. In all of Warner's media, it's been brought up 3 times. Once in the new Looney Tunes, a second time in Teen Titans Go.
Did they reboot the Loonatics?
They're one to talk. And finally in the aforementioned Animaniacs. Those last 2 references happened in November of 2020. Despite all the hatred, the show isn't actually that bad. This might be nostalgia goggles, but I would actually say it's pretty decent. And most fans of the show are willing to acknowledge that it's far from perfect. The fan base also mostly just consists of people who grew up with it, featuring the occasional person who found out about it and thought, oh, that's ridiculous, I'm going to make a video about it, and then found out that it wasn't that bad. Which they can't exactly, watch it legally on any streaming service because they don't exist on there, but, whatever. I'm not mad about that at all. The show isn't a masterpiece, but I would argue that there's a lot of untapped potential there. From the premise to the world to the characters to any individual episode. Okay, so this is the hardest part to talk about. No one wanted to document this show. Google was not my friend, but the Loonatics Unleashed wiki was. And even then, I can't find how this idea originally came up, how it got greenlit, why it was greenlit, or anything else involved in actually making this show. The first glimpse that the public saw of the show was when a teaser ad aired on the Kids WB. It starts showing a bunch of Looney Tune merch and an animator drawing several Looney Tunes. Then he's called away and a bunch of animated newsreels announce that there's a meteor going to hit Earth. An inkwell then spills on the drawing and the characters turn into the Loonatics.
What's up, Doc?
I am so glad I never saw this preview as a child and instead just stumbled upon the show by accident. It really only gets worse from here. There's an introduction by a woman named Maxima who says that she was the one to put the team of superheroes together. They then show the heroes in some comic panels and random bits of Flash animation. She then introduces the characters. There's Duck, a duck who is the weapons expert and has built-in sonar. Slick, a coyote who does vehicles, surveillance, and has regenerative abilities. Roadster, a roadrunner who is the speed. That's it. Lexi, a bunny who is the disguise expert with super hearing. Spaz. Who the fuck? A Tasmanian devil who is the muscle and has jaws of steel. And finally, Buzz, a bunny who is the leader, an expert in martial arts, and has laser vision. Maximo then says that while the characters look familiar, this is a whole new world. The world of the Loonatics. The preview received massive backlash from pretty much everyone. There was even a petition by an 11-year-old to protest the series. Luckily, this preview was released during pre-production, and it gave creators time to reimagine the character designs, change names, and retitle the series Loonatics Unleashed. So the Sonic movie wasn't the first time that the internet complained its way into causing changes. The designs were changed from edgy to a softer look that they would use for the series. But the premise alone was still hated by many fans. The idea of a dark, gritty Looney Tunes reboot was just something that didn't appeal to people. Like, even other companies were confused as to why this show was happening. There was still hope from the production staff that people would at least give the show a chance, though. It was 2005, Twitter wasn't a thing yet, so excuse their blind faith in humanity. The show then went into production. When there was actually some material for it, a new trailer was released on the Kids WB. It was met with a more positive reception, but a lot of people had already made up their minds about the show. I would say it's too little too late, but they literally changed the tone, the characters, a whole lot, and people still decided it was going to be garbage. A lot of the backlash came from the idea that these were meant to be the original Looney Tunes redesigned, that this was a permanent change. In reality, this was something more akin to Tiny Toons. I think if the original advertising didn't exactly show the Looney Tunes literally becoming the Loonatics and instead kind of embrace the completely separate characters angle, it wouldn't have received as much backlash as it did. There would still be backlash, though. Looney Tunes fans are kind of insane. The premise of this show, aside from being a Looney Tunes superhero reboot, is... I'm not going to say it's super unique, but it's definitely interesting. In the year 2772, a meteor strikes the city planet of Acmetropolis, tilting the planet off its axis and unleashing powers onto the world. You are going to get this premise very fast because they say it at the start of every episode of Season 1. And I want to highlight some things. The first is that the planet is called Acmetropolis and not Earth. Like, we all know it's Earth, but they call it Acmetropolis. Why is that? So we all know the Acme Corporation from the Looney Tunes. They're the company that makes the products for Wile E. Coyote and also kind of became a generic company used in most Warner Brothers cartoons, such as Acme Acres and Acme Looniversity from Tiny Toons. But to get where I'm going with this, we need to talk about Acme Corporation's part in Looney Tunes Back in Action. Yes, this has a point. In the film, Acme is a large corporation who literally wants to make 3-year-olds work in sweatshops to make their products, and also wants to be evil. Just straight up say it. They want to take over the world. But aside from that, Acme is placed in a position where they're basically a proto-Amazon. They sell you cheap products that can get to you very quickly. Amazon is slowly but surely trying to take over every small business and drive out any competition. We all joke that Jeff Bezos is going to take over the world someday, and he'd probably rename it Amazonia or something if he did. Acmetropolis is the world where this happens. The Acme Corporation has taken over the planet and renamed it Acmetropolis. Like, so many things are just Acme. This is a really interesting bit of world building that is never explored. Why did they call it Acmetropolis? There's really no reason. They never discuss the fact that there's an entire company that pretty much owns the whole planet. Like, it would have been so easy to make the big mega corporation that runs the planet the big bad. They've kind of already done this. They're already evil. They're the ones supporting Wile E. eating the Roadrunner. Come on, guys, explore this. This show is more serious than any other Looney Tunes production, so I don't know why they didn't. I'm guessing they didn't think of it at the time, but also no one is exploring this in their fanfiction either. Fanfic writers, please take this entire video and run with it. There's quite a few changes from the original ad. Characters had their names, color schemes, powers, as well as their roles on the teams completely changed. Maxima became Zadavia, Duck was no longer the weapons expert and had a complete power change, Slick became Techie Coyote and was now the team's resident smart guy, Roadster became Rev and was now a light red instead of a blue, Lexi was no longer the disguise expert and instead the second in command, Spaz was changed to Slam and was given generic Tasmanian powers, and Buzz Bunny was changed to Ace Bunny. Everyone assumes Ace's name change was due to the same reason that Hannah Montana isn't allowed to be called Alexis Texas, but the truth is that there's already a copyrighted character with the name Buzz Bunny. There was also a complete redesign to make them less edgy. Quite literally, a lot less angles. Is it weird that I want to know what this show would have been like if they had stuck with the original designs? Each one of the main characters can be split into one of three categories when talking about how they relate to their original Looney Tunes counterpart. They're either carbon copies, basically their own unique character, or a mix of both. And I will now discuss these characters not by these categories, but instead the order they're presented in the Season 1 intro. Ace, voiced by Charlie Schlatter, is the descendant of Bugs Bunny. He's technically a carbon copy, but really he's just a watered-down, action-orientated, and less fun Bugs. Which is probably what people expect from a superhero adaptation of the Looney Tunes, but that doesn't mean it's enjoyable or makes the characters stand out. He ends up feeling like the leader of a generic shonen group with Bugs flavoring. The characters being distinct from the Looney Tunes actually helped the show rather than hindered it. Ace was just too similar. His powers are laser vision. That's it. I think he got the most boring power, not because laser vision is boring, but because it doesn't really tie into his character. He barely uses it, mostly relying on his moves instead. My dude, my guy, just say fighting. Just say hand-to-hand combat. It's not that hard. He used to be a stuntman for movies before the meteor struck, so that's why he knows this stuff. Also, his backstory really doesn't matter. It's just justification as to why he's good at hand-to-hand combat. Probably the thing he uses the most is the Guardian Strike Sword. Like the protagonist of a magical girl anime, he will remind you of its name every 5 seconds. Ace's relationship with his team members just kind of feel like they're his co-workers and not his friends most of the time. That's actually true for most of the relationships on this show. He and Lexi are meant to be really close, but I don't see it. Tech and him have a pretty good back and forth when they need to solve problems. I would say that he and Duck have a Bugs Daffy kind of relationship, but more serious. He does get less annoyed by Rev than most of the other Loonatics, so I appreciate that. Overall, I think the first big mistake of the show was trying to make Ace the main focus. The Loonatics should have been an ensemble from the start instead of trying to have one character be the lead. And I know this was basically inevitable since Bugs is literally the Warner Brothers mascot. Still doesn't mean it was a good choice. I think they also tried really hard to make him cool and thought that would make up for his lack of originality. I don't know what cool is, but whenever a TV show tries to make a character cool, it just doesn't work. Unless they do it in an over-the-top way. Then it's fun. I'm sorry if there are any Ace stans out there, but to me, he's just got a rather forgettable personality and isn't very interesting. I had to use TV tropes to help me remember what his character was for this. And I've seen this show 6 times. Lexi, voiced by Jessica Ticciacco, is the descendant of Lola Bunny. She is the second in command of the team, and I'm very happy to see that she is actually different from Lola. Although that's rather easy given that in 2005, Lola's only 2 appearances were in Space Jam and Baby Looney Tunes. So it wasn't like people could really get angry if they changed her personality. She's not fully different from Lola. They're both still the token girl characters in their appearances. And because it's the mid-2000s, Lexi still gets stuck with some tropes associated with that. However, she does age surprisingly well. Despite falling into some of the tropes, she's still pretty well-rounded. It's not all makeup and clothes, even if she does make a few comments every once in a while. She also likes video games, has a strong personality, and unlike a lot of token girl characters in TV series, she doesn't get kidnapped all the time. As an additional bonus, she's in no way boy crazy and never even mentions romance as an option for herself. I will admit that I found her less relatable at 22 than I did at 7. Probably because 7-year-old me thought I was going to be Daphne Blake and 22-year-old me dresses like Wacko Warner. Lexi has 2 powers, so she's already doing better than Ace. Yes, I am going to dunk on Ace for the next hour and a half. She's able to create psionic blasts from her ears to take out bad guys, and when she uses it underwater, it actually becomes less focused and spread out, so she's able to take out multiple targets at once. The other one she uses is her super hearing, which description is in the name. It's not super interesting, but it has been pretty helpful from time to time and actually has a point. There's also an episode where she gets to have plant control powers, and I wish she got to keep it for the rest of the series. Sadly, it was only a 1-episode thing. And finally, she's also skilled in hand-to-hand combat, but I find hers more fun. I can't explain why. Probably because she doesn't just rely on it and instead actually uses her powers most of the time. I will say that she probably has the least defined relationships on the team, and that really sucks. She doesn't talk with Tech or Rev much, but I do enjoy the occasional interactions she has with Slam. The most she talks to are Duck and Ace. With Duck, it's that she's constantly annoyed by him, but they also have some common interest which the writers don't take advantage of. Ace and Lexi are a good team, but aren't super close. They get paired up a few times on missions, but that's it. Yet, despite all of that, the Wikipedia article on her says that she has a crush on Ace. I don't know about that. I think people just saw Boy Bunny, Girl Bunny, and thought they were endgame. Like, ship and let ship, but I don't think there's any canonical romance there. Lexi is a descendant of Lola, and Ace is a descendant of Bugs. However, in every piece of media involving Lola and Bugs, they're a couple. So if Ace and Lexi are related, and are only the descendants of one of them, that implies Lola and Bugs don't end up together and get with other people. All they had to do was say they were cousins or something. Or say that one of them was the descendant of Lola and Bugs, while the other was the descendant of Babs and Buster Bunny. All I'm saying is that I have solved every single problem with these 2 answers. I think Lexi is a pretty solid character, but could have used some more exploration. She still has a pretty lackluster backstory of not getting onto the cheer squad when the meteor hit, but I don't think that really affects much of her character. It's most likely a justification for her acrobatic abilities, but I don't mind it that much. I guess it doesn't really matter to me because I got to see a cool female character as a kid who was also the second in command of a team. I didn't see that much in 2005. Wait, do I even see it now? Danger Duck, voiced by James Marsden, is the descendant of Daffy Duck. He is almost a carbon copy, but I would say more toned down and focused. He's still an attention seeker, but there's a clear place where he wants that attention to come from. He wants to be recognized by the public as a great hero and recognized by Zadavia as someone who could lead the team. He makes it very apparent that he wants to lead the team over Ace. Which just leads to the question of how Ace gets to be the leader, but that's a question I'm going to always have. Duck is also meant to be the second main character because he's the descendant of Daffy, but the show doesn't seem to remember that till the end of the first season. I don't know, I think they rely too much on following the Looney Tunes formula sometimes, especially in which characters get top billing. I say about a show that is meant to be about their descendants. Duck's actually got some awesome powers, the first being his quantum quack, occasionally referred to as quacking. He's able to short-range teleport, which has come in handy a lot, although there are some continuity mistakes in what he is and isn't allowed to take with him while quacking. Oh, he can take a whole person and chair with, but he can't take his spacesuit? Quacking is actually kind of reminiscent of Daffy in his original Screwball character depiction, so I think it's meant to be an actual reference. The other power that he has is Power Orb Randomizer, which allows him to summon eggs that have some random things in them when they break. I question how this works, but it's still the most unique power of all the Loonatics. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen another power like it. Maybe one of the X-Men? There's a fuck ton of those guys, someone's bound to have something similar. His eggs are also affected when he's around or near water. Referred to as aquadense, Duck is able to fire blasts of aquatic energy instead of the usual random substance in eggs. It also allows him to control water. I wish more of the Loonatics had special abilities with their powers. Duck has pretty much the same relationships with every member of the team. They all find him incredibly annoying, or he finds them annoying.
A Google is a numeral 1 followed by 100 zeros and was invented by American mathematician Edward Kastner, born 1878, died 1955. And the reason they call it a Google is because Kastner asked his nephew Milton, who was then 8 years old at the time, what name he would give a really big number.
Okay, yawn. I'm really bored now. Stop.
You leave my sweet bean alone. I said that he and Lexi have a few things in common that could be explored more, but I kinda don't want it to be explored more since he's a sexist.
You know women, when they get something into their heads, there's no stopping them. You can try, but they never listen.
Like, she can't do anything in this show without him making some comment about how women are crazy. I can't tell if this is a product of the show being made in the mid-2000s, but it still grinds my gears and just makes me kinda hate Duck in those moments. Duck at first seems to have an underwhelming backstory, which is that he was a pool boy when the meteor hit. I actually will be okay if this was his full backstory. Duck talks himself up and has a massive ego, so I think it would be pretty hilarious if he had a really underwhelming origin. I think the writers were aware of this, and it was the only one of the Loonatics' backstories that is fully played for laughs. And many of them deserve laughs. It's also revealed in season 2 that he's an orphan who got adopted, and that episode is gonna be a discussion. Overall, his character is imperfect and is a product of the 2000s sometimes, as well as a lot of copy and pasting from Daffy. They still do some interesting things with him, but I don't know if the answer is to make him further or closer to Daffy to make him a better character. Although Daffy is one of the funniest Looney Tunes, so maybe closer? Also, if he wasn't a raging sexist, that would make his character so much better for me. Slam, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, is the descendant of the Tasmanian Devil. He is another carbon copy. He's pretty much the Tasmanian Devil, but nicer. His powers are pretty much just everything Taz can do, but more. Aside from his strength, most of his powers can actually just be duplicated by Rev, so I really don't know what he's adding to the team here. His backstory is that he was a wrestler who didn't throw matches when the meteor struck. It only comes up again in one episode. Most of his relationships are the same from person to person. They like him, but get annoyed when he eats all their food. I do think he and Duck have a pretty good relationship. They seem to be the ones that spend most of their downtime together. There's also comments made by Lexi which make me assume that they knew each other before the meteor crash.
I haven't seen Slam have this much fun since his old days in the wrestling ring.
I don't know, something about that line makes me think that they were friends. There's really not much else I have to say about him. Next. Tech, also voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, is the descendant of Wile E. Coyote. He's the team's tech expert and the reason that none of them are dead. I'm serious. I don't know why most of the team is there when Tech solves almost every problem that they have. They can't beat the villain with their powers, and then they turn to Tech. That's how 80% of the episodes go. He's also one of the 2 Loonatics who's actually different from their Looney Tunes ancestor. Like, thank God someone who isn't just a color change version of the original. This is probably why he's one of the most popular characters in the fandom. His powers are that he has the ability to control metal and molecular regeneration. The first one he doesn't use as much, but I think it's kind of cool that he can make shields with it. He uses his molecular regeneration a lot more. Most of the time when he gets hurt during superhero fights, but sometimes he'll get hurt on purpose. Most of the time when there's a character with the ability to rapidly heal, writers will just use it as a way to avoid consequences of getting major injuries. With Tech, they actually take advantage of the fact that this guy can turn to ash and be fine in a few seconds. Hey, this thing would kill anyone. The guy who can basically die and be fine is gonna take it. Both his powers and his spot on the team are actually really clever references to Wile E. Coyote. Wile E. considered himself a genius, worked with a lot of Acme tech in the cartoons, and would basically die and be fine. I wish the other characters' power reflected the original Looney Tunes. It would be a lot more clever than some of their ham-fisted references. I think Tech's more interesting relationships are with Rev and Duck. Duck is basically how he normally is with everyone else when it comes to Tech, but they get paired up for a fair amount of episodes, constantly butting heads and still hating each other at the end of each one that focuses on them. I don't know, I just find it interesting, especially because Wile E. and Daffy are never paired together in Looney Tunes media. I think future media needs to take advantage of unexplored dynamics in the Looney Tunes cast. There's a lot we probably haven't seen. But then there's Tech and Rev, which is my favorite dynamic in the whole show. I could talk about it a lot, and I'm gonna save it for a little bit later. Just know that they are best friends and total nerds. Tech probably has the most fleshed out backstory among the Loonatics. He was a student at Acme University and stopped one of the show's original villains, Mastermind, and locked her away in prison. He was later kicked out of the university for projects that didn't work, but really it was because a faculty misused the machine just as the meteor hit. I'm gonna go more into Mastermind later, but just know that I love that she has a backstory connection with one of the Loonatics. Tech ends up being the most fleshed out character in the show, as well as one of the more unique. He stands out against most of the others due to his pretty well-developed backstory, not being a carbon copy of the Looney Tunes he's based on, as well as being the reason they save the day half the time. At least in the first season. He's still not a copy in the second, but I think the writers realized that they had him save the day too often and decided to change up who did so. Which is a good change for the other characters, but as a result, there's not really a lot of tech-focused episodes in the second season. He does end up sharing them, but really none of the episodes have the same personal stakes for him as they did in the first season. Rev, voiced by Rob Paulsen, is the final member of the Loonatics and the descendant of the Roadrunner. He is the lunatic who shares the least amount in common with his ancestor. For one thing, he can actually talk and not just make the of the original Roadrunner. In fact, he never goes Rev is rather upbeat and actually finds the positive sides of every situation. He's kind of fun because he's also got no brain-to-mouth filter, so ends up saying whatever he wants. His whole personality just kind of gives off major ADHD vibes, and I'm down for that. He rambles at 1,000,000 miles per hour and is definitely something that is meant to be annoying to the other characters. However, the unintended side effect is that I just find him endearing and want him to have a chance to finish a sentence, goddammit. Any character that's meant to be annoying or have a lot of annoying moments just weirdly ends up being kind of adorable to me. He's just a sweet boy. In case you couldn't tell from everything I just said, Rev is my favorite and I am about to overhype him. For comparison, when I typed this out, every other lunatic got about a page or less for me to talk about them. Rev has 2.5. Yeah, so prepare for overhyping, and for my voice to go. Rev has 3 powers. The one used the least is his GPS tracking. He has the ability to track people and objects anywhere, and as I was typing this out, I realized how overpowered that is. There's points in the show where they set up traps for the villains or wait for them to commit more crimes to find them, but why do they need to do that when Rev could just use his GPS to find them? Why don't they use this more? I know why, it's so that they can have the plot happen, but really, it just causes a major plot hole. Really, this could have been solved if they nerfed it slightly. Like saying he has to have a personal object or something to find them. Nerfing this one thing solves every problem. His next power is flight. He can fly, but apparently no faster than the team's jetpacks. This guy should be getting to crime scenes faster than the rest of them with his super speed. The way his flying works isn't actually consistent. It's implied that he's just flapping his wings at supersonic speed, but then there's moments where he catches someone or grabs something and he's no longer flapping. You could make the argument that with one-handed stuff he's flapping really hard with the other one to stay up, but in reality he should be hilariously plummeting to the earth in those moments. His final power is that he's a speedster. I'm kind of obsessed with the way they show his speed. Most of the time, super speed is emphasized by showing it from the speedster's point of view or just showing things getting done rather quickly. Time will slow down, people will stand still. We've all seen the Flash and X-Men Quicksilver scenes. Suddenly they know everything because they read an article in 10 seconds. We know how this traditionally works. Rev's a little different. We do see things getting done fast, and everything he does during superhero fights is pretty standard speedster, but the way his speed is shown in his everyday life is what I love. Typically with speedsters, once they get a hang of their powers, they can just turn it on and off whenever they want. It wouldn't affect them in their day-to-day lives aside from occasionally speeding through work or other tasks. But for Rev, it's like he can't turn it off. It's always on and he can't stop it. He talks crazy fast. He sometimes will just ramble because no one can keep up with what he's saying. He sleeps like this. And aside from it being adorable, it's kind of fascinating. His brain works 3 times faster than everyone else's, so he's able to keep up with Tech's technobabble, and it's the reason he's so incredibly smart. I just love Rev's speed! In terms of relationships on the team, first of all, I kind of enjoy his and Ace's relationship. They don't spend a lot of time together, but the little moments I do enjoy. They seem to be friends and actually like each other. Ace also probably tells him to shut up the least. Then again, Duck is the only one who actually does that frequently. Occasionally they team up Rev and Duck, which is funny because it's implied that Rev is the youngest member of the team, and as a result, he's probably the only member Duck has any kind of authority over. But Rev is still way more competent and smarter than Duck, so he's pretty much just playing along on Duck's ego trip. I'd say Roadrunner and Daffy is a greatly unexplored relationship in the Looney Tunes series, but Roadrunner and anyone who isn't Wile is the true unexplored dynamic of the franchise. Is this why Rev is so underused in the show? Back to the actual topic at hand, Rev's best friend is Tech, which their Season 1 dynamic and Season 2 dynamic are drastically different. So their Season 1 dynamic is pretty much that they are best friends and that Rev is basically Tech's lab assistant. Not in a bad way, but Tech has moments where he relies on Rev to get him his gadgets or just straight up has him do the technology stuff. Like I said earlier, Rev is actually incredibly smart since his brain works faster than everyone else's. This is what leads to them having such a good friendship and well-established dynamic. There's also a lot of moments where they'll just save each other and help each other and stand close to each other, and Rev will just randomly place his hand on Tech's shoulder. Look, I don't know if I actually ship it or if there's just a Destiel-shaped hole in my heart that I'm trying to fill with every ship imaginable. Either way, they're the most popular ship in the fandom. Season 2 switches up their dynamic. They go from best friends who gel together and assist each other and just genuinely get along to a lot of bickering. I don't know how to feel about this. I know the show is based on Looney Tunes and they were trying to bring in that Roadrunner versus Wile dynamic, but I will always maintain that this show is better when it's not just a bunch of Looney Tunes references. I really liked that, if anything, they subverted audiences' expectations by having them get along and have reasons that they would aside from that aversion. I still enjoy their interactions and they don't fight all the time, but there's this extra emphasis on them being at each other's throats.
About you, but I'm sure he wanted to tell us about you, but he never got around to telling us about you.
No, I like that Tech never told Rev to shut up in the first season. Only Duck is supposed to do that. And even then, I don't like it. I feel like if the first season was them fighting, but the second season was them getting along, it would make more sense and can be seen as their dynamic growing into that friendship. Not just them suddenly hating each other. Especially because in the first season, it's apparent that Rev really likes and respects Tech. But backtracking, this is going on for longer than necessary. I did not realize how many feelings I had on this. I wouldn't say Rev has a fleshed out backstory so much as we actually fully understand why he is the way he is when we meet his family. His first backstory is bad and I kind of want to ignore it. He was a delivery boy when the meteor hit. It affects him in no way at all. But we actually get to know a little bit more of Rev's life before the meteor. His family is introduced in season 2 and we discover he was raised by the worst kind of people. Capitalists! Rev is the only one of the Loonatics where we get to actually know their family. There are also some of the few memorable supporting cast members that aren't just Looney Tunes copy and paste with a slight twist. He's got a mom, dad, and brother, and clearly he's used to being put under strain, and he just wants to be a good son for his dad and not let him down. But that same need to be a good son came at the expense of hurting his brother, because his parents ended up more focused on him than their younger child, and both ended up with different expectations put upon him that shade. Am I looking too much into this? Yes, I just love my ADHD bird child so much. I think Rev is the most underappreciated and underused character in the whole show, and yet somehow the most overpowered. This is really evident in the less plot-focused moments of the show. There will be moments where characters are just hanging out and I don't even know where Rev is the whole time. What does this boy do in his free time? Someone tell me! He's also underutilized and I think the writers didn't know what to do with him most of the time. Although that's true for all the Loonatics. Overall, he's my favorite character on the show, and actually my favorite speedster. I'm sorry, Wally West, my childhood won out on this one. Despite being underutilized, he steals a lot of the scenes that he's in. He was designed to be annoying, but comes off as endearing and fun. He's also pretty fleshed out in the screen time that he does have. I still wish there had been more episodes about him, as well as more fleshed out dynamics with the rest of the team. Rev was the true MVP of the whole show, and no one realized it.
It's Zadavia.
Zadavia, voiced by Candy Milo, is... I guess you could call her the team's Master Splinter. In the first season, she's the mysterious person who shows up at the start of every episode to tell the Loonatics what's going on and give them missions. Apparently, she pays for everything in the tower, but they don't get paid at all. Yet another superhero universe where the people don't get paid. Why aren't superheroes getting paid in worlds where secret identities aren't a thing? Especially when they're the ones handling the world-ending problems. Where was I? Oh yeah, Zadavia. She mostly appears as a distorted hologram with a brief in-person cameo in episode 6 before being fully revealed at the end of season 1. It turns out that before funding the Loonatics, she was the co-leader of a planet called Freeling alongside her brother Optimatus. However, Optimatus was evil and wanted to rule the whole universe and took over the whole planet. Zadavia escaped to Acmetropolis, but Optimatus found her and sent the meteor there. And then we all know the rest. Well, not actually, because we never knew how she met the Loonatics and how they all got together. But whatever, none of us were ever curious about that. Zadavia's powers are way less defined than any of the Loonatics. The wiki says it's beam lights, whatever that means. It's vague energy that makes things happen. Apparently it's just kind of a thing on her planet, or at least between her and her brother. Most likely the least interesting power on the list, but it's revealed pretty late in the game that it doesn't work without light already there. Wait, there's a power with a weakness on this show? Her relationship with each member of the team is slightly different. She's not really friends with any of them and barely interacts with them outside of meetings. She seems to have a lot of respect for Ace and trusts him enough to give him an ancient artifact of her people. Lexi she acknowledges as a good potential leader, but doesn't really have anything else other than the occasional shared comment. Like everyone else, she hates Duck, but he does annoy her the most. Especially with how insistent he is with trying to impress her and get her to make him team leader. Slam seems to like her. And then there's this weird thing where she may or may not be into tech. Like, it's just kind of hinted at, but it's like a vibe. Morbid curiosity overtook me, and there's one fanfic. I didn't read it, but it's out there for anyone who's curious. That's all I got. Oh, and I don't think she's ever acknowledged Rev in all of her screen time. My poor boy is underappreciated so much. Zadavia as a character concept is really great, but also might be a little too fleshed out for this show. Like, she comes with a home world, several side characters, and a bunch of unexplained powers. She's got a D&D player character level of backstory for a character who really should be an NPC. Why did I use D&D terms for this? I'm not saying she's bad, but she just has a generic mystery woman personality, and they might have overthought her backstory for a show that is essentially meant to be Looney Tunes but superheroes. And that's it for the main characters. And the supporting ones. This show didn't have any supporting characters. In fact, I'd argue Zadavia is really the only one. And she's got so much backstory that affects the plot, she doesn't even feel like support. There being no supporting cast really drags down the characters, and I think the lack of interactions between the team members means we don't get a full idea of who the characters are. It's why a lot of their potential is wasted. It's like Avengers crossover interactions. I miss domestic Avengers-based hope for that franchise. I could go into the villains, but I'm gonna save those for the episodes. Especially because sometimes the villains showcase the problems with each individual one. Like a lot of kids' shows, this season is mostly random episodes with a few that fall into the overarching plot. You could just watch the overarching plot episodes, but then you'd only watch like 12 episodes of the whole show, and that's like literally less than half of it. Am I gonna go through every individual episode and talk about what's good and what needs to be improved upon in them? Yes, but first I need to talk about Season 1's intro. So like anime, the show has a different intro for each season. The first season's intro is Zadavia giving a voiceover of how the world came to be the way it is as a meteor falls to Earth. It then cuts to the individual characters in superhero positions as descriptions of their powers appear on screen. Then a quick visual of most of the villains of the season and ends with the characters in a group shot. It's pretty serviceable for this season of the show, and the music has a weird sci-fi synth style that has a bit of an off feeling to it. It's kind of a bop, but if anything, I'm not a good judge of music, so who knows. And now that that's done, on to the season.
Time to crush some ice. Let's jet.
This episode starts with Acmetropolis becoming frozen and then cutting to the Loonatics. Each of them has a little character moment, which is welcome since this is the first episode of the show. It does establish what most of their core character traits will be, even if Tech is gonna get his after a few minutes to establish that he's their tech guy. They get a call from Zadavia because apparently they can't figure out on their own that the entire planet is getting frozen over. It's also a little weird because it's hard to determine how long the Loonatics have been at this. Duck not having a superhero name, Zadavia telling them that their superpowers weren't the only thing to affect the planet. They imply that this is one of the first things that the Loonatics are doing to protect Acmetropolis. But given how settled in they are and the amount of tech that's already been created, it also implies that they've been at this for a while. So which is it? It could be that this is the first thing that they're dealing with that came from the meteor, But a later episode, Ace literally states that they don't deal with stuff that the cops deal with, like bank robbers. They might just be establishing things for the audience, but at the same time, why not just have a pilot that has the characters starting out just as confused as we are? Why can't the first episode be the meteor falling to Earth and them dealing with the fallout? I think that would be a much better pilot than the one we got. In fact, if this was a second or third episode after a meteorite episode, the way the Loonatics talk and act would make more sense. Also, Lexi questioning what happens to Zadavia when she leaves would also be warranted, since an earlier episode would be able to establish how much the Loonatics know about her. Since they're so casual about this, to the audience it seems like something that's part of their everyday lives. So why would Lexi be questioning their Zordon? They then get some weapons because their superpowers are basically useless for this situation and for most of the other problems in this series. Seriously, they barely use them in this episode. This is why I said Tech is the most useful member of the team. They use the weapons on the iceberg, but it doesn't work. So Ace just has Slam run around it in a tornado really fast to try and get it to melt. Which makes no sense because for the rest of the series, Slam would not have fire on him when he runs. You know who does? Rev! I swear, Slam's powers can just be redone by everyone else. Also, Ace, you have laser vision. And it's not like Cyclops' concussive blast, so you can actually light things on fire with those. We saw it in this episode when you unfroze food with them. The iceberg melts, but Lexi hears something inside. It turns out that it's space Vikings. Which is stupid. But it's a stupid I can get behind. Ace says,
What's up, Doc?
when meeting them, and they're clearly trying to sell it as a cool action hero greeting, but it's just not working. Like, no. Keep it out of the show. Or the action scenes at least. Or don't use it as an intro and instead just use it for comedic purposes. That's what they do other times and it works, but just not here. No. Ace then pulls out the Guardian Strike Sword as they start to fight. The other Loonatics just stand around for this instead of also joining in. They eventually get frozen in a block of ice. Duck teleports out while Slam gets the rest of them out, only to find that the Vikings have frozen everything again. Also, Zadavia can just hack any phone or screen to contact the Loonatics, which it later establishes that she can call them through their suits, so really she should have done that here. Whatever, she gives them information that they need to get onto the Viking ship, and as they're about to go, their jetpacks short circuit from the cold. Tech summons some hoverbikes out of nowhere, which are somehow not affected by the cold. They have another fight, then they all go off and ride a boat and act like it's the greatest piece of technology in the world. I never said this show was well written all the time. They get onto the boat and all the Vikings are gone. Ace has Rev find them with his GPS powers, which he almost never uses again. It's shown in a different way here than normal. Literally every other time he's just standing there, but this time they have him project the location out of his suit. Something that will never be shown again. It just leads to me questioning how their suits work. They find the Vikings, Tech discovers a way to short-circuit them, but gets turned into a molten pile of goo in the process. When I was a kid and I watched this episode for the first time, I wasn't reading the words in the intro, so I didn't know Tech had molecular regeneration, and was very confused when he was perfectly fine in the next scene. Zadavia then calls and congratulates them all, except for Duck, before hanging up. Duck then calls her, and instead of congratulating him, she just tells him to call himself Danger Duck for his superhero name, and thus the episode ends. This episode establishes what would be the formula for the rest of the season. Cold Open has the villain attack the city. The Loonatics are then hanging out. That has nothing to do with the main plot. Zadavia calls them and tells them what's going on. They head out. They fight the bad guys twice, normally failing every time. They get Tech to make them some technology that saves the day. Then Zadavia calls them at the end to congratulate them. There's always some slight deviations, and this episode's deviations are Duck's name choice, which again establishes some questions about continuity. But also, why is he even trying to come up with a superhero name? None of the other Loonatics have them, or it's never implied that these aren't their real names. Although I'm pretty sure Tech is a nickname, you can't convince me otherwise. Aside from the question of why superhero names, Duck getting called Danger Duck really doesn't affect anything. No one ever calls him Danger Duck, they just call him Duck all the time. This episode is fine, it's completely serviceable, but doesn't really work as a pilot. It leaves questions that are never really answered. The only one that is who Zadavia is. But I'm just questioning how they even know her in the first place. Fanfic writers, give me a good answer. Since every episode this season pretty much follows this formula, I'm not going to recap every single one like I just did. I'm mostly going to talk about the stuff that needs to be improved on and the stuff that I liked.
She gets to go out, and we get to battle mutant spiders. Nice. Let's jet.
Giant monsters are attacking the city, and they find out the cause is a mad scientist who bioengineered small creatures to turn into them when they are fed chocolate. I recognize that this is the plot of Gremlins, but I have never seen Gremlins, so it doesn't really matter to me. Premise is obviously stupid, but it's a fun kind of stupid, and I'm not going to say that for every episode, because honestly, that's every single premise in most sci-fi fantasy media. These ideas are creative, it's just that the writers are stuck in a formula, so they end up executing these really creative ideas in the most generic way possible. That's its biggest problem. There's nothing really wrong with this episode, they just executed it in the most generic superhero way possible, but with some comedy splashed in. It does establish this thing where Zadavia is all-knowing, and it's creepy.
Good point, Ace. The boy with the first fuzzy fed it a whole stash of chocolate candy before going to bed.
How do you know that boy gave the fuzzy a chocolate? Are you hacking into the cameras? That's weird, Zadavia. It is actually somewhat of a Lexi episode, though. Girl does keep up with the trends, so that's not a particularly deep dive into her character, but it is another aspect. This also ties in with Duck, actually. They do have these plot points of commonality that I enjoy, and this episode does show that early on. This is also the only episode where Lexi gets kidnapped. Loonatics do occasionally get kidnapped, but I'm very glad it's not Lexi all the time.
Alrighty, gang. Let's jet!
A woman by the name of Black Velvet is stealing technology to flood the world into darkness after the meteor caused her to become blind, so she wants the world to suffer like she did. Wow! This show was made in 2005. Wow. I think this premise was ableist. This episode is a case of them trying to tie in the part where the Loonatics are just hanging out to the main plot of the episode. But because it's Loonatics, they're gonna do it in a weird way that doesn't entirely work. Duck is trying to order a cape, because he's just like this, and keeps losing signal on his phone. The other reason you can tell this was made in 2005 is because Duck is using a flip phone. Meanwhile, Tech is meditating, which will never come up again in this show. They did this with Ace too. Was meditating the only thing the writers could think of to have the characters do in their free time? Anyways, Duck's phone breaks Tech's concentration, and Duck starts to swear off technology. Tech makes a bet with Duck over that, Tech agreeing to pay for Duck's cape if he can make it a week without anything high-tech. Aside from some random comments from Duck, this really doesn't play into the episode. You could argue that because Black Velvet is a tech-based villain, it does, but that's not really a factor. She's not even really that tech-based. She's just using technology. It doesn't even come up again till Black Velvet kidnaps and mind controls Tech. This is the episode that establishes that this is going to be a thing. A lot of villains really like Tech. Really like Tech. If you can't understand what I'm implying, villains find Tech hot. So does most of the fan base. But I'm not a furry, so I don't really get it. Anyways, Duck pulls out his phone and uses the ringtone to snap Tech out of his mind control. But then at the end of the episode, Tech has the cape because Duck lost the bet when he used his phone. So there's two reasons why tying this into the main plot didn't work. It's the wrong villain, and this affected the characters in no way at all. Black Velvet needs to be way more tech-based and use technology to actually harm them and control it. This idea would work way better in an episode where Mastermind is the villain. And Duck didn't learn anything from this. What was Duck supposed to learn from this? Did they just do this to establish that Tech doesn't like Duck? They do this pretty much every episode, so they didn't really need this one to establish that. And now, Briley compares Lunatics Unleashed to what she measures all other superhero adaptations against. Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. At the start of the Kang the Conqueror 3-parter in Season 1, Steve asks Tony what a futurist is, and they start to have a conversation about the differences between the past and the present. This continues to about halfway through the first episode, where their normal and not over-the-top bantering that doesn't involve daddy issues and has a point is interrupted by Kang the Conqueror, an evil dictator from the future. The rest of the 3-parter is the Avengers fighting Kang to stop him from taking over the world. But the whole theme of the 3-parter is the conversation between Steve and Tony. It's not about the past versus the future, but about the values of both. Steve and Tony come together at the end and recognize the value in each of their philosophies. They have a personal moment play into the themes of the episode and tie directly into the villain. Lunatics, it's such a generic episode that it doesn't work. There's just not a lot of effort put into it. There's ways to tie the two together, but you would have to retool the villain to be more tech-based, have Duck learn something, have Tech and Duck be more divisive, or have the two come together to save the day. There's other ways to end it, but those are just some basics.
Why is everybody looking at me? Let me guess. Me again.
A news station intern is hit by a lightning strike and turns into a villain, Weathervane, who now has the ability to control the weather. She takes out her anger on her boss, Misty Breeze, and all of Acmetropolis. Weather villains are hard to handle sometimes. You have to make them a threat, but there's a way to make them overpowered. You have to handle them with a certain level of finesse. So take Weather Wizard from The Flash. He is extremely overpowered in his first real appearance, but in every other appearance after that, he's significantly less powerful. First appearance creates a tidal wave that nearly destroys the city, and the only reason it doesn't is because of time travel. But after that, he needs help to take out the Flash. He's severely depowered. This is also a problem with Weathervane. They've made her way too overly powered in her first appearance. She literally turns into a giant weather dragon set on destroying Acmetropolis. Her motivation also isn't very good. She just hates her boss. Or wants attention, it's kinda hard to tell. I think something like this works if it's more accidental. Like, accidentally she becomes overpowered and doesn't know how to control it, which causes her to hurt people and destroy parts of Acmetropolis. Then the Lunatics find a way to stop her, but because she still can't control it, she gets put in prison. Then all subsequent appearances are either her slowly becoming a powerful villain or being used as a weapon against her will. But in the show itself, after her defeat, she's severely depowered in all other appearances. This show did not have a rotating rogues gallery, even though it wanted to. Really, that's my biggest problem with the whole episode. The rest of it is good for what it's dealing with. I just feel like there's a better way to handle a villain with this power set. I think changing that up really would have helped make this episode and Weathervane stand out more. Fun fact, that's Kaylee Cuoco voicing her.
Well, there's a change in the air, Misty, because I am the weather.
She's gotten a lot better at voice acting since her days on this show.
It's me, dickhead. By the way, that's also the Wi-Fi password.
All right, gang. Let's jet.
Frankly, I'm a little uncomfortable in a place where duck and orange sauce is a dinner entree. If anyone starts drooling, I'm quacking out of here.
Anyone else become uncomfortable when universes that have a mix of humans and anthropomorphic animals make reference to the fact that humans eat animals? Nope. Okay, just me? Alright, fine. A villain by the name of Thaddeus Dare steals the Jade Serpent Crystal and plans to use it to place the entire planet underground. Don't think too hard about that plot. Anyone want to guess why he wants to do this? I'll give you one. To the person trying to guess something logical, I'm sorry, it's the meteor again. It made him go crazy. The meteor is the fucking particle accelerator of the Looney Tunes. I don't really have a lot to say about this episode because it's the formula of run around trying to defeat the villain until Tech comes up with an idea that saves the day. But it does have one moment that really annoys me. Lexi gets grabbed by one of the rock monsters, and instead of using her psionic beams to blast it, she just struggles for a minute till Duck rescues her. Like, what was the point? It also highlights this weird need to have the most random interactions in the middle of fight scenes and the very cringy quips. Like, when Rev defeats several rock monsters, is nowhere near Ace, but Ace tells him he's going after Slam. Is there anything else you wanted? Something to say? Or Lexi just taunting the rock monster?
You're getting on my nerves! And you don't want to see me mad.
What does any of this mean? None of this dialogue is clever. And now, Riley compares things to Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Again. Hawkeye is the sassiest, mouthiest character on the show, and that's very reflective of his comic book counterpart. Fuck you, MCU, for not making him that fun. This man talks all the time, including during battle. He'll make jokes, wisecracks, and taunt not just the villains, but also his team members. And there's 2 reasons he can get away with this. The first is that his lines are really funny.
And I will meet my end with pride.
I'm gonna meet mine with kicking and screaming.
The second is that it's perfect for his character. He keeps talking both on and off the battlefield. He's not exactly the most open person and normally hides behind a lot of sarcasm. He's not the only character to give one-liners or crack a joke, but he does so in a way that's consistent with his characterization. Loonatics just has really weird one-liners that could be given to anyone. They're strung together in really weird ways and don't make any sense. Finding more unique things for the characters to say and picking which ones actually mouth off in battle would work a lot better than just having them all do it. Or if they're all gonna mouth off, they could at least write lines that fit their characters. Or are funny.
No, in fact, it's just the thing we need to destroy that meteor.
Okay, this is the episode where all their origins are explained, and most of them aren't very good. First of all, having them all be less than 2 minutes and all crammed into one episode was a bad idea from the start. Secondly, all of their origins are really lackluster and don't fit their characters. Finally, these origins don't give any new sights into the characters and don't explain how they got where they are. It's already explained in the season 1 intro how they got their powers. Meteor, hit Earth, we get it. We already know this. You know what we don't know? How did they meet Zadavia? How did they get their cool tower base? How long did it take them to control their powers? How did they meet each other as individuals? Why would any of them want to be superheroes? Yes, I know this is a kid's cartoon, made before Avatar, but kids' cartoons can be good and explain things. It happens. And now, Riley compares Loonatics Unleashed to the best DC cartoon, Teen Titans. The Titans don't have their origin episode until literally the last season, but because of the way the show has gone, we didn't need the origin of their powers. The show had already established most of them, except for Robin. He's a mystery in the show. Never even mentions Batman once. So because of the way the show was structured, we didn't need to know the origin of how individual characters became who they are. We needed to see how they came together as a team. And that's what we got. Go shows how the team came together, and the only question left is how the hell they got a giant T-tower built off the coast of Go City. It was Batman's money, wasn't it? And that's what Loonatics needed. Although the show hadn't explained what they were doing before becoming superheroes, we still didn't need the origin of how they got their powers since we already knew it. Also, you can kind of imply what some of them were doing beforehand. Tech was probably a scientist, Lexi was probably something girly, Ace, weirdly enough, I thought he would be something different. Wrestler for Slam, makes sense. Duck being something incredibly underwhelming and making his ego huge, also makes sense. The only one that's kind of weird is Rev, but they did a lot of underwhelming stuff with Rev. Outside of the origins, the episode is to stop a second meteor like the one that gave them their powers from destroying the Earth. It's fine, it's the half of the episode that I like. It does have some fun character interactions and actually starts giving us an overarching plot.
The second attempt were just demolished by those so-called Acme heroes. But the third time will be the charm.
Who is this dude? None of you guys know, unless you watched the show as a kid. Or weren't in a different tab when I mentioned Zadavia's brother.
I think it's time we take a trip to the big top. Let's jet.
The Loonatics trace an escaped creature back to a circus where they are trapped. They discover that all the creatures there are humans who have been genetically warped by the Ringmaster. They get caught and are also halfway genetically transformed, which also causes their powers to accidentally swap. I love the premise for this episode. Execution, not as much. The circus is one of the most messed up things in the show, and I do wish they had explored it more. Like, dude kidnaps children and turns them into genetically messed up creatures. But we're not going to deal with that. I do love the villain, though. He's voiced by Tim Curry, and for some of you, that's enough, but he does have a presence that I greatly enjoy. The potential for this episode comes from the power swap. I love a good power swap. Can't do a body swap, though. Freaky Friday is so hard to watch, y'all. But the episode doesn't take advantage of what makes a power swap so great. They should be using this as a way to explore the characters, their relationships, and how they use their powers. We're gonna compare things to Teen Titans again, guys. While it is a body swap episode, the powers come with the body, since both Raven and Starfire's powers come from their biology. Most of the episode, Raven is incapable of using Starfire's power, while Starfire can't control Raven's. It's only when they take the time to learn about each other and how each controls their powers that they're able to come together and stop the Puppet Master. The episode ends on the two of them finding common ground with each other and becoming friends. In Loonatics, it's just we can't control our powers. Wait, if we work together, then we can control our powers. And that works till they get their powers back to the correct people. What was the point? No new character development or insight to the characters happen. We don't learn about how their powers affect them as individuals or how having the other powers affects their relationships with the other characters. It's just there and gone.
A thief? Isn't that beneath the super types?
Not if he's a super thief. Let's jet.
Massive is the villain for the episode. He has the ability to control gravity, and the show actually makes him pretty small fry. He's just a bank robber. Look, I'm not trying to compare every superhero piece of media to Avengers or Mightiest Heroes, but if that show did teach me anything, it's that gravity manipulation is a very strong power. They're OP, and you have to do a lot to beat them, either through being very smart or just being the Hulk. Lunatic doesn't really take advantage of the concept or do anything that is super unique. Well, actually, there's one thing I do like. They make it so that when he manipulates gravity one way, he needs to send the same amount of energy in the opposite direction. So if he makes one thing very heavy, he needs to make something else really light. This is a pretty interesting idea, but they never find a way to manipulate it into how they can defeat him. I thought they would find a way to do something clever with it, but they didn't. Tech just makes a thing that causes his power to no longer work. The episode is pretty standard, but they do introduce Foghorn Leghorn's descendant, and he's a human instead of a rooster. Don't think about it too hard.
You heard her. Let's jet.
I have a dazzling smile.
Bad guy named Cypher has the ability to steal people's powers and make them his own. Get it? His name is Cypher, because he siphons off powers. I am surprisingly okay with this extremely obvious naming convention. Heroes losing their powers is actually really good for character development in media. Most of the time. Other times it's standard CW drama. How many times does Barry have to lose his power on that stupid fucking show? But do they use it for character development here? No. It's the standard bad guy gets the upper hand, tech creates technology to help, they defeat the bad guy. Power loss works for characters who have become overly reliant on their powers or have had their powers for years and years. The Loonatics have only had their powers for a year at this point, and while you clearly see them rely on them for fighting, you don't see this very much in their everyday lives. Shows like Smallville and Supergirl have shown characters who have had their powers for almost their whole lives coming to terms with having their powers gone for a while. Not just in reliance on their powers as heroes, but in their daily lives. This weirdly doesn't happen as often in superhero media as you would think. Come on, MCU, get on this. The Flash does this several times, but most of the time they just make him feel emotions and he can run again, or they just make him die. I fucking hate that show. If the show had gone on for longer, which was never going to happen, or if they established that the characters had their powers for longer, they could have used the episode to show how much they rely on them. Like the power swap episode, this also could be used to show their relationships to their powers. It could have also been a good character episode for just one of them. Instead of having them all lose their powers, have it just be one of them. The one who relies on their powers the most. It's Rev. Rev clearly relies on his powers the most. He's the only one who flies, he does everything at super speed, speedsters are just naturally known to rely on their powers. The other way to improve this episode is to compare Cypher to another lunatic, make him a foil of sorts. Cypher steals powers for fame and just wants attention. Who on the Loonatics also wants attention and uses his powers to do so? Why, Duck, of course. Cypher could be a character foil for him, but guess what? They don't do that. They just have him take all their powers. They're almost on the right track because Duck is able to keep away from him the longest and keep his powers, but they're missing a couple of parts. Despite falling flat, they actually have a small character moment outside of superhero battles this episode. I also think this episode was supposed to take place before Stop the World I Want to Get Off, just because of Basher Ball, which is a sport made up in this world and they never explain how it works, so I'm not going to try to understand it. Rev and Ace just go to a game together where they meet Cypher and he takes their powers. I don't know, I just like seeing the characters doing things outside of HQ and super stuff. It's like when Duck and Lexi got takeout in New Chinatown. I guess I just like seeing the show deviate from the norm slightly.
Blah-blah-blah, heard it before, bored me then. Now knock it off with a prank phone call.
Please don't hang up. My grandson...
What a nut.
It's the time loop episode. I hate it. This is the worst episode of the whole show. Time loop plots are very hit or miss, and this one can't do a single time loop trope right. And because I'm me, I'm going to compare it to other things. Specifically, the best episode of the Arrowverse, Legends of Tomorrow's Here I Go Again. So the episode starts out at the end of a loop, which, okay, not a bad idea. But then Ace wakes up vaguely feeling deja vu. We repeat this several times, but this is the weird part. Everyone else starts to become aware of the loop, and this is where the problem starts. Because they're basically all aware of the loop, but not aware of the loop at all. It's fucking weird. In Here I Go Again, Zari is the only one aware of the loop. The only reason she can get away with getting Nate to understand they're in a time loop is to reference Groundhog Day every time she goes through the loop. But also, they're on a time travel show and they pretty much all expected this to happen at some point. The loops are also all different. They start out the same, but Zari does different stuff in the loop every time. Every loop is the same in Loonatics, and it's boring as fuck. It always ends the same. And yeah, Here I Go Again always ends with the ship getting blown up, but the characters aren't always doing the same things over and over again. The journey and endpoint are different. Here it's just wake up, go to military base, plan goes wrong, die. While technically the villain is time-based, it's not in the way that you would expect. He's not the cause of the loops. This isn't like with Harry Mudd in the Star Trek Discovery episode with the really long name that I'm not going to say. He's constantly resetting the timeline to get what he wants, slowly but surely figuring out how Discovery works. And you also need a reason as to why people are aware of the time loops. Stamets is aware because of his connection to the Spore Drive, while Zarya is aware because it turns out to be a dream created by Gideon so that she'll stay on the Wave Rider. Lunatics don't even have the excuse of the meteorite made them aware, or they got hit with something in the labs that made them aware. No, they're just aware. No explanation. We're not even going to get into the Time Professor. Wait, yes we are. He's got an actual name, but I'm not looking it up. He's the reason that they're all in the time loop to stop his grandson from stealing military weaponry. He unlocked the formula for time travel, and I hate that, because they then use time travel to stop the kid in a dumb way. But there's so many easier ways to stop him with time travel. Like going back in time and informing the Loonatics the day before so they can prepare. But no time loop. Look, I'm a consumer of trash. I have watched every episode of Supernatural, and at least half of them twice. I can't stand this episode. I have watched this show in its entirety at different points in my life, and I remember every episode. Not every detail, but I basically remember the premise and some scattered bits in there. I always forget this episode exists. The only reason I remember it now, and will probably now never forget it, is because I'm so angry with it. This episode is the opposite of Marvel's Axis event. There, I've forgotten everything except the premise and the one thing that makes me angry. God, I'm never gonna be over that parental thing. Fuck, why would you undo that? I know why, but still, fuck! Loonatics, I remember everything except the one episode that makes me angry. When I inevitably rewatch this show in a few years, I'll probably forget that this episode exists, and then the second it starts, I'll remember, and I'll be angry again. I know with the other episodes I've talked about ways in which they could have improved, but I deserve one episode to rant about how much I hate it. It showcases the worst of the show. Forgettable villains, contrived way to get the plot going, how little we know about the characters, generic plot points that aren't even executed correctly in their genericness. It's just the worst. Also, Acmetropolis has a military weapons lab. Why does Acmetropolis have an occupying army? No, seriously, someone tell me, are they at war with someone this whole time and I'm not aware of it? Why do I think this hard about a kid's show? Now that I am done talking about the episode, I am going to go delete it from my memory.
I want you all to get down there. Tech can fill you in on the way. Zadavia, out.
Let's jet!
Mallory Mastermind escapes from a high-security prison and plans to take revenge on Tech for putting her there. This is the best episode of the first season and has a really great villain. She's an original, but this is the only episode, I think, where they make the original villain fully work. Her backstory is great and actually ties in with Tech. Mastermind was Tech's partner at university and discovered that she was going to create a machine to steal the intelligence of others. He was able to stop her, but she did get powers of her own in the process. It's a pretty good origin for a character foil. While most of the other villains just get the excuse that their powers came from the meteor, hers actually came from something else. It's like whenever the Flash faces a villain that wasn't caused by the particle accelerator. Thank God, a different origin. I don't actually have much to say about the rest of the episode. It falls into the standard Loonatics formula. However, it has such a great villain that it stands out, and sometimes that's all you need. Although this episode does lead to some questions regarding the character designs. So in the comic Cometh, we saw that the Loonatics were the same colors as the Looney Tunes are normally depicted, kinda implying that the meteor dyed their fur. But anytime they're out of their superhero outfits, they're all just the original colors. Why not just keep them their colors, especially since we can literally see their fur in their superhero outfits? Even as a kid, I thought this made no sense.
We gotta flush out that power drain. Let's jet.
So this episode entirely breaks from the formula, so we're gonna go back to a play-by-play recap, occasionally mixed in with my compliments and complaints. This is also a two-parter, so prepare for a cliffhanger in the middle. A prison train is transporting Mastermind, Weathervane, Massive, and Cypher to a new prison watched over by Duck. Suddenly, a portal appears and takes them to Optimatus. They all agree to help him take down the Loonatics while simultaneously setting up that Cypher just wants to betray everyone. At the Loonatics HQ, Ace agrees to let Duck search for the criminals as long as he takes Rev with. Duck and Rev head off, but Ace was really just finding a way to keep Duck busy. Which, Ace, this is an all-hands-on-deck situation. You're gonna need Rev there. They find the villains and all start taking them on in one-on-one fights, which really the only one I'm actually invested in is Tech versus Mastermind, because they actually made her Tech's villain, versus the other three where Massive was just a team villain, while Weathervane and Cypher should have been Ducks, who's not even here. The Loonatics are defeated and taken to Mastermind's original prison. Cypher is left behind while the others search for Duck and Rev. The two are on the prison transport as Duck tries to be in charge, but Rev is smarter than him, so it doesn't really work. The villains break into HQ and attack Duck and Rev when they arrive. Honestly, this fight shows that Rev and Duck are kind of the most OP of the Loonatics. Even if they are just trying to get away, they just evaded capture from 3 supervillains where previously took the entire team to take them out. The two escape and have to find the others, but Rev can't find them with his GPS powers. He then realizes that they're being held in Mastermind's prison, and they make their way there. Duck then distracts Cypher as Rev tries all the codes to unlock the prison. But Duck ends up caught by Cypher and has his powers stolen. Rev then distracts Cypher as Tech figures out what the code is.
That's it? Mastermind's locker combination?
Yeah, we shared one in college. Yeah, it's a long story.
Why does everyone want to fuck this coyote? I know they're basically just confirming what was implied in the Menace of Mastermind, but still, why? They fight the villains till Optimatus arrives and takes them away. Duck decides that Cypher can't leave till he gets his powers back and goes after them. They're cut off from Duck when Zadavia arrives and reveals that Optimatus is her brother. I already told you all this. Part 2 starts as they head back to HQ where Zadavia explains her backstory, which I already did, so I hope you were taking notes. Zadavia then tells them that she found the planet where Optimatus was hidden and that they'll take her ship to get there. You know when that ship would have been really helpful? When they needed a ship to go to space to blow up the meteor and the comet cometh? She made Tech build a whole spaceship when they could have just borrowed hers. The fanbase has a weird hate boner for Zadavia sometimes, but they never bring up this moment when talking about it. Probably because she's not insulting Duck. They get to the planet and are called by Optimatus, who just wants to give a general bad guy gloat before he kills them. Zadavia ends up getting captured, and Tech, Lexi, and Slam go out to fight the pods that captured her. The ship then blows up, with Rev and Ace inside, but don't worry, they're revealed to be fine after less than a minute. Lexi laments on how sad she is that Ace died during that time, and doesn't bring up the fact that Rev was on the ship also. Like, no one does. Tech, that's your best friend. Say something! I know I'm not the only fan bothered by this, but I am extra bothered because he's my fave. On the planet's surface, Duck is able to escape his holding cell while Zadavia is taken to Optimatus. Optimatus reveals that he's going to destroy Acmetropolis, and Duck is able to get his powers back before he sends the other villains there. Duck frees Zadavia, and the rest of the team arrives to help. Duck tells them that Optimatus is going to destroy Acmetropolis, and Tech is able to stop this from happening using what I think is a USB drive that Optimatus used to hack their HQ. The issue is that the planet they're on is going to be sucked into a wormhole now, and they steal Optimatus' ship to leave. He gets one last attack in, but Zadavia then sends him through a wormhole. They get back to Earth, and the episode ends with them implying to defeat the rest of the villains off-screen. I know I said Menace of Mastermind is the best episode of Season 1, but this is still a really good set of episodes. It works for the characters and is overall a great end to the season. My only major issue is the motivations for the villains. Cypher, Massive, and Mastermind never had taking over the world as their motivations. But the episode portrays it like those were their original motivations. Massive just wanted money, Cypher just wanted attention, and Mastermind just wanted, revenge. Weathervane kinda had the motivation to take over the world, but in reality, she just was in the same boat as Cypher. A lot of people saw the whole show, and really the first season mostly, as a dark, gritty reboot of the Looney Tunes. But in reality, it's not the case. Sure, it was more serious, but it wasn't any darker than, say, Teen Titans. Although Teen Titans could get real dark. Real dark. I should say an average episode, not like, the episode where Raven has nightmares or like deals with her dad or anything in season 4. Why am I talking about Teen Titans? The show is serious with comedic moments, and I think most of the comedy does land. Most of the characters are good and have really nice designs. Each episode premise has a lot of potential, but the writers aren't using it. Each episode needs 1 or 2 more rewrites to add some more comedy and then clean up any of the flaws. They could have had a lot of really good episodes if they just did that. Overall, it's a pretty good season. It's still clearly meant for kids, but it's not unwatchable for adults. Those last couple of episodes just real good though. Real good. They hit hard. Now let's go on to season 2. Season 2 actually has an overarching plot. This is a result of the season 1 finale, as well as a few new characters being added in. This season also adds in a lot more Looney Tunes descendants, mostly as villains, instead of coming up with their own original ones. There still are some original ones, but this is the season where they really start to embrace that they're a Looney Tunes property. It's a lot less serious than the previous one. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the characters this season, since a lot of the episode plots don't need that much reworking. That will still occasionally happen, but again, it's more character focused this season. Not as deep as I want it to be, but still. I'm going to give this one big overall gripe of the season is that they switch from saying superhero to action hero. I don't know why this is. It's stupid. I hate it. Just say superhero. It was something to do with the marketing and them trying to distance themselves from the fact that they made the Looney Tunes superheroes. I don't know. I don't get it. It was a bad choice, and I hate it. And now we need to talk about the intro. So, I don't hate it entirely. The idea of the intro is better than the intro itself. The visuals I do fully like. It's more of a comedic tone, which was what they're going for this season, and I think they work. However, the song itself, again, idea of it, that it's more lighthearted, but at the same time, it's not the best. I don't know if it's the lyrics or the beat or whatever. It's just not working. I kind of want to listen to it 100 times, though.
Heck, you and Lexi keep monitoring the situation. Everyone else, it's time to jest.
The secrets to Ace's Guardian Strike Sword are revealed when an interdimensional train appears, and along with it, a new ally named Deuce. As they go up against Sam, a bounty hunter set on stealing it. Please ignore that I can't pronounce that. It's okay, it's a running joke in this episode. So first of all, I already love that it's just randomly starting out in the middle of Acmetropolis instead of waiting for Zadavia at HQ. Secondly, love that they customized their hover bikes to match their colors now. Thirdly, love that they're incorporating actual Looney Tunes style jokes early on, and this is all before the intro. I wouldn't say Deuce is an interesting character, but I do like that unlike other villains who go with a more heads-on approach against the Loonatics, he has at least tried to be sneaky and gain Ace's trust first. Him just wanting to rule the galaxy like Optimus really kind of takes away any uniqueness he has as a villain, though. First name I can't pronounce, Sam, is just Yosemite Sam, and I think he was a good choice to use for the villain of the episode. He works to add more levity and to make Deuce feel like a bigger threat than he already is. Now we have to talk about the Guardian Strike Sword. The origin of the sword is that it's a powerful weapon from Zadavi's planet and actually has untapped powers. It's implied that it's sentient and chooses a wielder in this episode, but the rest of the show doesn't support this. Honestly, this episode really highlights how much more Ace uses the sword than his actual powers. I think it would be better for his character if they cut his powers out altogether and just let him use the sword all the time. Overall, this is a good start to the season. You can already see an improvement in writing in both comedy and plot, as well as smoother animation. You can really see it in the action scenes where things are a lot higher stakes and can move a lot more. I will say, though, that adding in a bunch of new Looney Tunes descendants does take you out of the show for a moment. Just because of the way the world was previously established in the first season, it takes a moment to get used to. It also does a good job at hinting at the future plot of the season. This is not the last time we're gonna see Deuce.
It's colossal! It's...
A laugh riot.
Oopsie?
A mutated dolphin uses his psychic abilities to brainwash sea creatures and attempt to take over the world. Meanwhile, Duck and Lexi discover that water has some unknown side effects on their powers. The power storyline is where we're gonna start. I really like this one, especially because it's another chance to show off their powers and to actually explore them. I like that Duck is so showboaty about his powers. He's not going to be insecure about them and just show off that he's got something new, even if it takes attention away from the mission. I also like that Lexi is insecure about how her brain blast has changed. She's really confident in what she already knows, but you can tell that she's got some insecurities. It's a really good character beat. I demand more Lexi episodes from this show. Also, that she become team leader. This show is over. I don't know why I'm demanding things from it. She also gets seasick, which for some reason a lot of ensemble shows feel the need to have at least one character who does that. The dolphin is voiced by Mark Hamill. That is the first thing I need to talk about before I even talk about the issue with him. The issue with the dolphin is that I'm never a big fan of environment saving as motivation for destroying the world kind of villains. Except Poison Ivy, but that's just because she's right. But this dolphin design is also generically creepy, and I'm okay with that. And I have to bring up the voice acting for this episode. The voice acting is really a highlight for the whole series. Despite pretty much everything else that people like and dislike about it, it's agreed that the casting was great. They're really giving it their all, and I think that the voice actors, who never get credit in anything ever, are the reason why people can get really into the show even when the writing isn't that great. That being said, what the fuck was happening with Czech's voice this episode?
But now the question is, what are they gonna do with him?
Like, most of the time it sounds completely normal.
I still can't lock onto either Duck or Ace's comm unit.
But then there's these really random moments where it doesn't even sound like the same voice actor.
Quiet down, Rev, and take a look at this.
Did Kevin have a cold or something when he recorded? Is it some weird additional acting? I don't know. I think this episode probably would have worked better in the first season, but it's still pretty good. It's entertaining all the way through. I just wish they did something more unique with the villain.
Tell you what, beat him, but just don't hurt him, okay?
Okay.
Slam is recruited by Pierre Lepew to take part in a wrestling match to the death. This one... Look, if you can't tell that Slam is my least favorite lunatic by now, you haven't been paying attention. They mostly just use him for comedy, and while I'm sure this episode is nice for Slam fans, it's really not focused on the characters I'm interested in. It's not bad, just not for me. So we need to talk about Pierre and how he is nothing like Pepe aside from hitting on Lexi. Also, he's a human. Boy, did that skunk get around. Like, he owns an illegal fighting ring where people fight to the death. What does that have to do with what Pepe would do in a futuristic setting? Then again, if they made him like Pepe, this probably wouldn't be a kid's show anymore.
Heck, retrofitted it from top to bottom, with thrusters, blasters, even a juice bar serving the finest carrot smoothie this side of Gemini.
1 billion miles for a smoothie? Oh, goody.
The Loonatics are tasked with keeping the royal Tweedums, the heir to the throne of Planet Blanc, from being attacked on his way back. Okay, so at the beginning of the episode, we actually get to see all the Lunatics' rooms for a second, and I want to talk about that because I think it only ever happens one other time in the series. Ace's room is pretty boring, but I see a fish tank and a snowboard in there. Lexi sleeps in a hammock and has a pair of skis as well as a surfboard in there. Nothing from cheerleading, which I find strange since she was one. Sam has weights and a poster from his wrestling days. Tech, we don't see anything in his room, but I'm pretty sure he just sleeps in the lab. Rev, same thing, although it shows that he speed sleeps and there's a bunch of books in there. And Dux is literally just filled with pictures and statues of himself. Actual episode, I fucking hate Tweedums. He's so annoying, and in a way that is meant to be annoying to the other characters, but not the audience. Didn't work. I want him to be eaten. This isn't Tweety and Sylvester where you're not wanting Sylvester to win. No, I want Sylvester to win. I don't find Tweety annoying, but maybe I need to watch more Tweety stuff. He's not my favorite of the Toons guys. Although it does work having him be a pampered, spoiled child in this. I will say Tweety and Daffy is a rather unexplored dynamic in Looney Tunes, so it was kind of fun to actually see their descendants, who are only a few degrees of separation from them, interact. We all know Daffy would hate Tweety. Okay, so Sylvester is literally Sylvester mixed with Darth Vader aesthetics. I kind of love it. Granny is here, but she's called Granicus. She's also voiced by Candy Milo instead of June Foray, which is a little heartwarming given that Candy took over Granny's role after June Foray's passing. This is also another piece of media where Granny ends up being a villain. I know it actually wasn't her back in action, but what is it with Looney Tunes media and wanting to make Granny villainous? This is also like one of 3 episodes where the conclusion is that Ace figured everything out without the help of anyone else. He just does it and it's extremely unsatisfying every time. Overall, a good episode, but if you're looking for the classic Tweety versus Sylvester fights, you're not gonna get them here.
Well, I'd really like to, Papa, to have important crime-fighting duties here.
No sweat, Rev. Spend some time with the family. If any end-of-the-world crisis comes up, we'll give you a buzz.
Rev's family comes for a visit, and Rev's dad is trying to get him to come back home and take over the family business. In the process of all this, Rev's younger brother Rip is ignored, and a piece of alien technology that feeds on negative emotions takes him over. This is the best episode of the whole show. And I'm not just saying that because Rev is my favorite and this is the only episode about him. It's just genuinely a really great episode. So throughout the show so far, the Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner dynamic is never referenced. Not once. In fact, Rev and Tech being best friends who get along is surprisingly a subversion of their dynamic. And then they go bickering the season, and I already discussed my feelings on that. This episode finally brings it up when we're introduced to Rev's family. I know I said that this show is at its best when it's not just making Looney Tunes references, but that's because most of the time they just feel like copy-pasted stuff from older versions. Here they made it apply to the show and the characters that are established in it. Rev's parents have coyote issues, which definitely trace back to the original cartoons. Fun fact, in real life, coyotes are not a major predator to roadrunners. It happens, but the chances of seeing it are extremely rare. This was part of the original joke from the 1960s cartoons. My head is filled with random Looney Tunes information because, sometimes I can't fall asleep at night, and instead of attempting to do that, I'll just watch a history of Looney Tunes videos at 3 a.m. Or is it 2 a.m.? One of the two. Anyways, aside from Rev's family hating coyotes, there's also visual references to the original cartoons. Rev's family home is in the desert and on top of those massive platforms from the shorts. There's also the gag of Tech constantly falling off platforms. He eventually comes prepared. And finally, Rev's dad constantly going meep meep. It sounds nothing like the original. Rev never once says meep meep in the whole show, so I'm glad they found some way to fit it in. Now, Rev is clearly put under a lot of pressure by his parents, mostly his dad. You literally see a shift in his personality once they arrive. Although Rev is always all over the place, he's now more nervous and trying to be impressive for his dad. This boy's got anxiety. At the same time, you see him trying to push himself away from what his parents wanted for him and trying to get them to actually pay attention to his younger brother, Rip. I actually like the relationship between Rip and Rev. Rev clearly loves his brother, but Rip is really annoyed by the attention Rev gets from their dad. As a result, Rip's constantly looking for attention and somewhat takes it out on Rev. But Rev is aware that they're ignoring Rip and actually tries to make his dad realize that Rip has good ideas and can help him out. I also like that when Rip says his feelings about being inferior to Rev while being mind-controlled, Rev doesn't take his "I don't mean it." He says that Rip did mean it, but his feelings were 100% valid. Look at this boy being aware of complicated feelings and understanding that people just need those feelings understood. Why is he so sweet? Despite my love for this episode, I have 3 little gripes with it. First, when Duck says,
"Let me guess, another accidental supervillain? What's next? Villains with notes from their parents?"
Name one other time in this show that there's been an accidental supervillain. You can't. This is the only time in the series. Secondly, it has the biggest "this was a kid's show made in 2005" slap in the face.
Oh, thanks, Tech. If you weren't a coyote and a guy, I'd kiss ya!
Then lucky for me, I'm both.
Is 2773 homophobic? I don't like this implication. Thirdly, the conclusion is kinda rushed. They have to get in a quick Ralph cares about his kid, solve the family business problem, and what to do with the parasite alien in under 2 minutes. So I'm not that mad that it's rushed, but I'm pretty sure Rev's parents still have coyote issues. Despite my problems, this is still the best episode of the show. Everything else about it is really strong, and if I only end up having 3 minor complaints about it, I'm really okay with that. Especially when one of the problems really just stems from when the series was made.
Oh, thanks, Tech. If you weren't a coyote and a guy, I'd kiss ya!
I don't know why Rev would have a problem with this. They're in love with each other.
Let's go teach Dr. Dare a little something about the past.
Duck takes credit for stopping a villain who plans to take revenge on him for putting him in prison. I now realize that this is basically the same plot as the Strangler episode from SpongeBob. The villain is Sagittarius Stomper, who is based on Shropshire Slasher. I think I pronounced that right. A lesser-known Looney Tune. He's only got 1 classic appearance, and then after that appears in The Looney Tunes Show, Tweety's High-Flying Adventure, and the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. In total, he's got 5 appearances. I normally wouldn't go into this much detail about the descendants, but I did for 2 reasons. A, he's a lesser-known Looney Tune. I didn't even know he was a descendant until I looked at the Loonatics Unleashed wiki. And B, I was looking at his Looney Tunes wiki page as I wrote this. I will say that despite being a character who barely appears before this, they do add a decent amount of references to the original short. I kinda love this random reporter who's obsessed with Duck. He's so gullible and is basically a baby Jimmy Olsen. I really don't have much else to say about the episode. It's good, but it doesn't really stand out.
That's the Western Museum, belonging to Hopalong Chiron and his robo-horse, Thunder. Let's jet!
As the team tries to capture an escaped Massive, Ace is being targeted by a bounty hunter named Electro J. Fudd, but Duck keeps getting caught in the crossfire. I think making Elmer's descendant a bounty hunter was a good choice for this futuristic sci-fi setting. There's not many references to the classic hunting trilogy, aside from the initial setup being that he hunts Ace, but later switches to Duck. Although his existence pretty much makes it clear that these are the descendants of Looney Tunes when Lexi brings up his family. But I have to go on a rant for this episode. So Electro is tasked with hunting down Ace because he's the greatest action hero of all time. And aside from the fact that they call the Loonatics action heroes instead of superheroes, and I still hate it, Ace isn't the greatest hero of all time, Tech is. Bet you all thought I was gonna say Rev, didn't you? No. I can distinguish between my favorite and the best. Almost every single bad guy is taken out by Tech or Tech's weapons. Most of the team serves no point other than to fire the guns. Seriously, he saves the day most of the time. To your, I don't know which side, other half of the screen, you will see a list of episodes going past in which he saves the day. It's at least half of them. So why should Electro go after Ace when Tech is right there? This is Techie Coyote slander. Alright, I'm done. Oh, also the circus man from The World is My Circus comes back. He's the one who hired Electro. I don't really see the point of talking about it. Next!
I say there's plenty of blame here for all three of you. Hey, maybe we could ship them all out.
When they mistake a high advanced weapon systems for a video game, Lexi and Rev accidentally hit Melvin the Martian's spaceship. He then wants revenge by destroying Acmetropolis. Okay, so Melvin is literally just Marvin, but he likes games. I'm not the biggest Marvin the Martian fan, but I think Melvin is the descendant they use the most for comedy, at least among the villains. You got some classic Looney Tunes gags in there, and they work really well. I think Melvin worked so well because he's already a sci-fi character, so it's easy to transplant all of Marvin's aspects onto him, versus the other characters where they had to tweak them into working for a sci-fi setting. This is also a Lexi-focused episode, and we get another trait of hers, that she's good at video games and no one else is as good. I wish they had shown this slightly earlier, maybe if they were hanging out during downtime, but you know what, I'll take it. I also find it funny that this is the only time a coyote catches a roadrunner.
What's this do? Please, keep your hands off my stuff.
It takes several centuries, but the roadrunner is finally caught for survival crimes. Overall, a really good episode, especially if you're into comedy. This one has some great stuff.
Great idea, Duck. When do we leave?
We? I thought I'd,
Well, don't think. You've already agreed. Let's go.
The Loonatics take a vacation to an island resort where a race of powerful women called Apocazons have taken over. The Apocazons are basically the Amazons, so I'm just gonna call them that. Also, their leader, Queen Athena, is voiced by Serena Williams. This has no bearing on the episode, I just think it's a fun fact. This is the first and only episode to bring up the fact that apparently the Loonatics have to do paperwork and Ace isn't doing it and just pushed it all on Lexi. Honestly, I think if the show was more comedy, I think they would play more into the idea of Lexi being an overworked underling while Ace is just a chill dude, not doing his work, laid back, ignoring his responsibilities. Lexi's 2 seconds from snapping already. The Amazons are portrayed throughout most of the episodes as villains in that it's implied they killed all the male members of their species. But I don't know how to feel about the twist that they didn't actually do that. I mean, I'm down for them being revealed not to be evil, but that felt weird. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why, but my favorite joke in this episode is just Tech and Rev fighting over who's in charge. It's at the beginning, and then they cut to it later in the episode, and implies that they've been fighting that long. But honestly, I like to think that they've stopped, and then just every hour they get into a shouting match about it again. Either way, it's funny. This episode really emphasizes Duck's ego. He's always the one to make reference to the fact that they have merchandise, and is constantly trying to talk about how popular they are. So him being the face of a company that's bulldozing what I'm assuming are the last bits of real environment on Acmetropolis to build resorts is 100% in line with his character. Also, him not really caring because he's getting paid also works. Zadavia should really pay them so they don't have to resort to this. Duck would still resort to it, though. 2 things with Lexi's powers this episode. The first is that they're showing her brain blast in interesting ways, like having her use her hands to focus it, have it move, and then delay going off. It's interesting. I like it. I think it might be effect of the nectar. The second thing is that the nectar also allows her to control plants. I wish she got to keep this after the episode. I think it would have been an awesome power for her to have. Although, has anyone ever noticed that plant control is mostly a female character's thing? Is it the poison ivy effect? This episode is both meant to be a girl power episode and an environmental episode at the same time. This is the second environmental episode this season. I don't remember what was going on in 2005 to make creators consciously aware of this. In terms of being a girl power episode, it works a lot better than most, But I think it's because her frustration with the guys doesn't come from them being sexist and more just that they make her do a lot of work and don't show their appreciation. So really, it could have been anyone on that island as long as they appreciated her and got along with her. Although if there was a single guy in a group like this, you know they would have played it for romance.
Pinkster? Is that you?
Duck?
While trying to stop some robbers, the Loonatics run into Duck's childhood friend Pinkster, who wants to learn from them. Pinkster is basically Porky but evil. Oh, surprise, the Looney Tunes descendant they added in turned out to be evil. What a shock for this show. Keeping him tied in with Duck is also a pretty good reference to their constant team-ups. Also their shared production history. See, originally Porky was the most popular Looney Tunes character. I think he was the original. I might be getting my facts mixed up. But then Daffy was introduced in Porky's Duck Hunt, and Daffy was the original Screwball character. His characterization would later have effects on characters such as Woody Woodpecker. He would thus take Porky's spot as the most popular Looney Tune, but as the Screwball characters started to fall out of fashion, Bugs Bunny became the most popular Looney Tune. But then Daffy went through some redesigns and he was able to evolve past that original Screwball character idea, and even though Bugs Bunny is now the mascot of Warner Brothers and everything involved in it, it is now up to a matter of personal preference. Daffy is the best one, though. This was about the Loonatics. Where the fuck did that all come from? The other Looney Tunes descendants are Stony and Bugsy, who are descendants of Rocky and Muggsy. Pretty much the same characters. They adopted Pinkster together. Wait. Is there actually gay representation in this show? This is now in all of your heads too. Anyways, I really like the addition to Duck's backstory in this episode. He met Pinkster at an orphanage, and when a couple was deciding which of them to adopt, Duck flipped a coin and he was chosen. Duck later reveals that he actually swapped out the coin for a double-sided one. As a result, Duck actually feels guilty about something and wants to help Pinkster. This is the part where I hate the ending of the episode. So at the end, Duck feels extra bad because he realizes that if he hadn't switched out the coin, then he would have been the one adopted by Stony and Bugsy, and would have become a bad guy, blaming himself for what happened to Pinkster. Pinkster then reveals that he planned all along to be adopted by Stony and Bugsy. Aside from the fact that this child planned to become a villain, seriously, what the fuck? The fact that they were actually going to have Duck face consequences for his actions, only instead to pull the rug out and go, nope, you're absolved from any possible repercussions, is a major cop-out. Also, Pinkster not being a corrupt cop is also a cop-out, but that's not the point here. The egomaniac realizing that one of the worst things he's ever done and one of the few things he feels bad about actually wasn't his fault. I'm sorry, but you just ruined possible good character development. I hate it. Also, Daffy and all of his descendants hate cops.
I guess you can't catch real criminals, so instead you just harass innocent citizens. What a waste of my tax dollars.
If you haven't noticed, we are super crime fighters, not local flatfoots.
It's Adavia! Code Red! She's in trouble! Let's jet!
Zadavia is invited to a music show when the main act starts to attack the audience and specifically targets her. First of all, the fact that this episode is titled Music Villain and it's not a musical episode is highly disappointing. Alright, actual episode now. So apparently Zadavia monitors the Lunatics' powers and then gives them performance reviews, but only to Ace and Tech. Those are the only two she actively likes. Also, her saying that Tech uses his powers more, where is Zadavia where? Boy is still overly reliant on technology. There's also been this thing throughout the show where they feel the need to comment about Tech not leaving the lab, which doesn't actually reflect the show itself. I mean, they show him in the lab, but it's not like he's ever ignoring his friends in favor of it. He's shown hanging out with them. If they're talking about hanging out with people outside of the Loonatics, the others don't do that either. I also need to bring up that all of their civilian outfits in this show are terrible and never work with the colors that they are. Is fashion bad in 2772? Why is Zadavia the only one that can dress well? So Rubius Oberon is the villain of the episode, and I always forget his name when I watch, but I love the reasoning for his villainy. He wants to steal Zadavia's powers, use them to find Optimatus, and take over the universe, all because Zadavia won't make his song the national anthem of Freeling. It's so petty. I love petty reasons for villainy. They give me so much joy, especially when they don't even try to gain any sympathy. Rev only had 2 lines this episode, but he was the MVP just by saving the lives of 2 people. Now on to the 2-part finale.
I was gonna tell you. I just didn't want to bore you with the details. Sandwich?
The Loonatics receive a call from Tweetums as his planet is under attack. Revealed to be the work of Optimatus, the Keyboard Man, and Deuce. Okay, honestly, the whole plot as to why they need Tweetums is low-key way too complicated for this series. I can deal with him wanting to take over the planet, but the planet being the center of wormholes, which was neglected to be stated in Blanc's last appearance, and them needing the scepter to activate the wormholes. I don't know, it feels very over the top to me. This is also an episode where Tech and Rev get left behind, which happens a lot in the second season. Is it because the plot would be over in 5 minutes if they were there? This whole 2-parter is also pretty good at combining both the original villain and the Looney Tunes villains. The episode ends with Deuce unleashing his robot army and the Lunatics searching for Tweetums.
Hey, a map pointing the way. Nice work there, Duck.
Yeah, don't mention it.
The team searches for Tweetums and try to stop Optimatus and Deuce. And we're in recap mode again. I love that they try and fake us out at the beginning with Zadavia. Like, no, we're not really going to believe that she's dead. She'll be fine. The rest of the team eventually find Tweetums, but it turns out that Optimatus was following them the whole time. Ace gets the scepter, but Deuce gets Tweetums. Duck then makes the trade for Tweetums, but gets captured. Duck might be the character that gets captured the most in this whole show. This should be a blow to his ego, but it never is. Deuce then betrays Optimatus because he wants to rule the galaxy. You know, in the first part, he took out the Keyboard Man, and before that, he betrayed Ace, and before that, he betrayed Zadavia. Deuce has chronic backstabbing syndrome, and it gets funnier the more I think about how far back he can go on betraying people. Also, I don't knock the music in this show, but because half the scene is trying to be serious and the other half is trying to make Duck look funny, so the cuts between the serious music and the humor music are pure whiplash. The Loonatics are rescued by Tech and Rev, and Tweetums tells them that the scepter doesn't work without the jewel around Duck's neck. This is what I mean by making it more complicated than it needs to be. Tech and Rev stay with Tweetums while the others go after Duck. Then we get to this next scene where, oh my god, Zadavia is obviously alive and she rescues Optimatus from Deuce. And then Optimatus is just suddenly on their side. Like, what? Dude gets betrayed one time and he's suddenly good? Like, you can't be, I'm no longer evil, I want to be loved about this. Man was gonna take over the universe. This is not how this works. He's not very complex, guys. Why would you suddenly do this? Why? Anyways, they find Deuce, free Duck, Zadavia, and Optimatus arrive, but they're defeated. Sylvester then betrays them by telling them about the jewel. I forgot to mention that he was there in the first part. Deuce gets the jewel, Tech, Rev, and Tweetums arrive with the army of Eggbots, and there's a massive battle. Ace faces Deuce one-on-one and kills him. They don't actually show it, but it's pretty heavily implied that this man is dead.
No, Duck! Optimatus has changed. It was the thirst for unlimited power that corrupted him.
This wasn't an outside force. This was internal, Zadavia. Stop trying to make it seem otherwise. Okay, I'm kind of laughing at that line. Zadavia tells them that she's leaving to go back to Freeling, and for some reason thought they were heroes in training this whole time. Lady, they have saved many things. At least 23 things. I think training ended before the show even started. She also says they're going to be Guardians of the Universe, and that is so close to a Marvel copyright strike that if this show was made now, they'd make a joke about it. They make Blanc their new home base, and the series ends. I mean, it's a good finale. Just that stupid Optimatus moment is gonna make for end of time. Ah! Season 2 is better than Season 1. It does a better job of writing fleshed out stories as well as building on previously established character dynamics. It also allows characters to gain the spotlight and not have every episode just be focused on stopping the bad guy. It's not the comedy people expect from a Looney Tunes superhero series, but it's still pretty good. Random things I noticed on this rewatch. Duck is the shortest member of the team. I don't know why I didn't notice this before. I like it. He's a short king. Tech and Rev have slight variations on their superhero costumes. Like, at first glance, they all look the same, but you notice some minor details with those two. Tech has extra ports on the upper arms of his. I think that's so that he can plug technology into it. I've seen him do it before. I think it's in episode 11 of season 2. And then Rev has thrusters on the back of his legs. I don't fully know their function, but I think it's so that he doesn't catch on fire. Final thing I noticed, during the end card, when they're all standing in their superhero pose and like the credits are rolling by, all of them are in their normal superhero outfits. But then Tech has a robot arm. I think it's meant to be like the glove from like The World Is My Circus. But like, I never noticed it till now. I don't think a lot of people do because no one ever brings it up. But now you are all aware of it. There was merch for this show. It does exist. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. But here's a picture of it. From what I can tell, it was a bunch of mini toys for some fast food restaurant. I'm gonna guess Burger King. McDonald's doesn't seem the type to have this, so my guess is Burger King. There were 2 games on the Kids WB website. I wanted to play them to see what they're like, but the web archive that they were on requires Flash, and that's gone. So enjoy these pictures from the wiki. Woo! And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Even though each individual episode has its own problems, I think the overall show could have been improved with one of 2 ways. The first way is to embrace that it's a Looney Tunes superhero show and double down on the comedy. Remove any idea that it's serious and instead play it as a parody, like Teen Titans Go. But good. Wait, is that show good now? I'm hearing mixed things from people. The second way is to cut the Looney Tunes out entirely. Hell, that was a theory going around for a while. That this was an original idea, but then they made them slap the Looney Tunes on top of it for IP association. But I don't think fans of the series would very much enjoy either option. They like that the show is serious while still being a Looney Tunes property. Something that happens a lot in the fandom is people making OCs that are meant to be Looney Tunes descendants or descendants of associated characters. The thing that people do love about this series is the characters. They're good characters, and not just because they're based on the Looney Tunes. They all have untapped potential, and the fans realize that. Why else would they write out very long, complicated fan fictions that flesh out the world and characters? I've praised this show, I've criticized this show, I think I've inserted my fanfiction that lives in my head into this essay at some point. It's a good show. It's not great, it has its flaws, and I get why people don't like it. But that doesn't stop it from being an enjoyable part of my childhood. I'd like to see it again, and not just references that make fun of it. It's a concept and characters that could still work. I just wish more people would see that. They don't need to ignore its flaws, but I think they should recognize when there's something good in it, even if it doesn't meet their definition of Looney Tunes. This essay is 38 pages long, nearly 21,000 words. I filmed from like 12 o'clock till like 7:30 day one, so I don't know how many hours that is, and then like 10 to 1, and then like an extra like 2 hours later. Someone do the math for me on that. I'm not even gonna say math correctly. This is gonna be at we're probably gonna be at the 2-hour mark by the time I'm done editing. Maybe longer, who knows? This might be my peak. Thank you all for watching. All of this has been my opinion or personal experience. Please feel free to leave your own in the comments down below. If you watched Lunatics Unleashed, what's your opinion? How many of you just clicked on this video because you like really long video essays on niche topics? Because, same. Let me know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well. I've been writing this since November, so, I hope it brings in some decent numbers. I'll see you all next time.